Hello, writers, and welcome to the Author Burnout Coach. Together, we will dismantle the burnout culture in book publishing and reclaim our love of stories. I am your host, Isabel Sterling, and this is episode 8. Hello, friends. I have a juicy topic today. We are going to talk about whether you should abandon your novel and write something new, or whether to stick with it all the way to the end. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have already seen my post from a couple weeks ago where I created this little flowchart that sort of walks you through whether you should keep going or if you can give yourself sort of the permission to quit. And I will link that in the description so you can go check it out. Today, I want to talk about the philosophy or the beliefs that I have that influenced my creation of that flowchart. And then just for fun, we'll have a little plot twist at the end because sometimes the right advice is actually the opposite of the usual advice. But we won't get too complicated to start. We're going to just start with the basics. Should you abandon your novel or keep going? Despite my multi-photo flowchart, the answer is actually pretty simple, at least in my view. The main factor is your ability to finish things, followed secondly by the rationale behind your desire to change stories. And before I even get into this, I will take a moment to acknowledge that finishing projects is harder for some folks than others for lots of reasons. Maybe it's ADHD or just a busy life at home. It isn't just as easy as, finish things. Finishing projects doesn't make somebody morally superior. Struggling to finish isn't a reason to be a jerk to yourself or tell yourself that you'll never make it as a writer. You may just need to find multiple different techniques until you find something that allows your unique brain to be able to finish projects. So whether that's writing things completely out of order, leaving little notes for yourself, it might take a little longer, but in the end, I find it's worth it because if you want to be a novelist, a professional published writer, you do need to develop the skill of being able to finish things. If you're early in your writing journey, I think it is much, much more important to learn to finish a book than basically any other skill. The marketability of your idea doesn't matter if you can't get to the end. Having incredible dialogue won't mean anything if you can't actually finish the story. And perfectionism in all of its forms at the first draft stage does not help you, especially when you're early on and you haven't built the skill of finishing things. If you are a writer who wants to be a published novelist and you've never finished a novel before, I almost always recommend that you finish what you're working on. Do whatever it takes to get to the end. Even if you know it's not something you want to continue to pursue and you never revise it and you throw it in the trash the second you type the last sentence, get yourself to the end. One finished novel is going to bolster your self-image more than 5 or 10 or 20 abandoned attempts. It gives you the proof that you can indeed write an entire novel, which in and of itself is a huge feat, one that we so often take for granted and don't celebrate the way that we really could. And finishing is the foundation for all the other skills that you'll develop over time as a writer. Now, once you have a few completed novels under your belt, you know that you can finish things. You do get to have a bit more discretion around whether you want to abandon a project that isn't working and switch to something else. So at this point, you've got the skill of getting to the end, but do just be careful. You don't want to then, finish 1 or 2 books and then have a string of 3 or 4 or 5 abandoned attempts. The trick now that you've got the finishing skill is we need to determine whether your reason for wanting to switch projects is valid or it's just a dressed up lie. And the most common reason I hear from writers, especially newer writers, honestly, all of us, I still do this sometimes too, but I catch myself, is thinking that this new idea is going to be easier to write. And this, my friends, is a dastardly lie, and it derails so many writers. The new idea is never actually easier. There are hard parts in every single novel, and you may find that you tend to have a similar pattern with every book. So some folks, their sort of moment is the 10K mark, and then it's like everything's hard and I hate it and I want to quit. And the beginning and the brainstorming of the new idea might feel more exciting and easier, but you're still always going to get to that part that is hard. Every idea is hard eventually. You want to be very careful not to get into the habit of listening to this siren call. If you do, you'll find yourself skipping from idea to idea, and you'll leave this wake of partially completed manuscripts behind you. So if this is the reason you want to quit, because you think this one is too hard, I highly recommend you stick with the book that you're on, because this sort of vision of, oh, this new idea will be easier is just a lie. It's just not true. Not true. So then the second most common reason I hear from writers when they want to abandon a book is that they feel bored with the story. Friends, a little bit of tough love for you. Your novel is not there to excite you. Creating excitement and inspiration is your job, not the story's job. You get to decide what goes in the book, so you need to put in things that interest you. You don't want to blame the book for being boring. You made it that way. And more often than not, it actually isn't boring. You've just convinced yourself it is because you've read the same passages over and over. So when this comes up for writers, and I do include myself here, my recommendation is to get back to why you actually love this idea in the first place. Like, what spark made you want to tell the story? How can you reconnect with that nugget of truth or fun or inspiration? What is the most ridiculous out-of-the-box thing you could do in your story to get yourself interested again? As you go through this process, you may discover that you were never actually that interested in the idea in the first place. And this will often happen if you chose an idea just because you thought it would be marketable, or you thought that agents would be really into it, even though it's in like a genre that you don't even like to read. And if that is the case, if that's sort of where the beginning of the idea came from, I do think it's okay to let the idea go and shift to something that does really invigorate you. Assuming, of course, you have finished something in the past, because we do want to have that finishing muscle. If you can't find a way to make this idea something that you love, and you started it from a place of thinking you had to write this, you can give yourself permission to set it aside, and then just be really intentional about what you start next to avoid creating this pattern of abandoned books. And I also do see sometimes the issue here being that you thought the book had it was exciting and you were interested in it, but then it just didn't have enough to it to sustain a novel. And sometimes that happens too. And it's really, the idea was more suited for like a short story. The third main reason I hear from writers for abandoning a project in the middle of the first draft is this worry that the concept isn't marketable, or that it won't be good enough to get an agent, or if they have an agent, it won't be good enough to even share with that agent because they're embarrassed by it, that kind of thing. So here at this point, I do think we can have some more wiggle room. And again, it depends on where you are in your writing journey. If you've never queried an agent before, I really wouldn't worry about marketability at the first draft stage. It's much more important to be putting the time in and building your skills as a storyteller than it is to figure out like how to write to market. However, if you're a few books in, you've queried multiple times, and you're already not really that in love with the idea anyway, it can be a good idea to let go of this idea and come up with something that you love and feel good about pitching to agents. And here's the other thing. Sometimes books make better sense as a second or third or 10th published project. Some books may be harder to debut with than others. It is okay to set something aside, knowing that you'll come back to it later, especially if you already have the good skill of being able to finish things. So a quick recap before I give you my plot twist on this whole conversation. So number one priority, we are growing our ability to finish novels. This is a learnable skill, and it should be your primary objective before you worry about things like quality and the market and all of that kind of stuff. And again, your brain might struggle more than others to finish things, and it's okay to take longer. It's okay to have to try multiple different techniques to find the thing that allows you to finish. So once you have that skill, you just want to be onto yourself about why you want to abandon the project. Are you just telling yourself that the shiny new idea will be easier, which is a lie? Are you expecting the book to inspire you instead of taking on the responsibility yourself of creating something that is inspiring or fun or silly or whatever type of book you write? Or are you just prematurely worried about the marketability So you're not even letting yourself go down the path of books that make your heart sing. So if any of those lies are the main reason that you want to quit, I generally recommend staying the course. But here comes the plot twist. Sometimes we just know that a book isn't working. It's like this undefinable feeling that the story either isn't meant for us or isn't the right time, or we went into the idea with the wrong intentions. Or maybe, as I mentioned a moment ago, the idea wasn't actually big enough for a novel, and it's really only about the size of a short story. So in those cases, sometimes letting a project go and truly moving on can be the best thing for us and for our creativity. Sometimes putting that project aside opens up our inspiration and our creative mind. It sets us free from all of the shoulds and have-tos that led us to an idea that wasn't right for us. This is where sometimes you might need some help and someone to bounce this around with, because the difference can be really subtle and hard to spot. You have to be willing to be radically honest with yourself. Are you trying to escape a project because you've reached the bit that's hard for you? Or are you trusting your story instincts to make room for something better? Do you like your reasons for switching? Are you willing to own the result of the switch, good or bad? If so, if you're willing to own your decision to either stay or to let it go, fuck what anybody else has to say, myself included. You are the boss of your creative world. You get to decide. Just make sure you like your reason and then go forth and create. Now, if you want support, my friends, as you learn how to trust these creative instincts, I invite you to join my 4-month coaching program. You'll learn how to love the process of writing, make peace with deadlines, and burnout-proof your entire career. You can learn more at my website, isabelsterling.com. There's a spot where you can schedule a call to chat with me personally about it, and I would love to see you in there and help you really learn to trust these instincts. Until next time, friends, happy writing.